Personal computer disassembly and assembly. PC disassembly procedures. Step 1. Unplugging. The first thing you do is to unplug every cable that is plugged into your computer. That includes the cables such as power, USB, mouse, keyboard, Ethernet, modem, AM/FM antenna, cable TV, etc. Just unplug all the cables for safety purposes. Step 2. Opening the outer shell or case. First, unscrew the 4 screw at the back of the computer. On most computer cases, there will be large knobs that you can unscrew by hand or by screwdriver on the back right side of the computer. The left side has small screws because on the side you can't access much on the inside. Once the screws are removed, you can remove the side panels. On most computers, they just slide off. Start with the left side panel, slide it towards the back of the computer. Now you can remove the left panel just like the other side. Slide it towards the back of the computer. Step 3. Removing the system fan. First, unplug the fan from the motherboard. You can find the plug by following the wire from the fan. Next, you will have to unscrew the fan from the outside. You should now be able to lift the fan out of the PC. Step 4. Removing the CPU fan. The CPU fan located right on top of the CPU heatsink, which is a large piece of metal with fins on the top. The CPU fan plugs into the motherboard in an awkward place. That is hard to access, but just follow the wires and you should easily find it. To remove the fan from the heatsink, remove the 4 screws securing it in place. Step 5. Detach the power supply. The first thing to do is unplug every wire coming from the power supply. You must disconnect the motherboard, CD/DVD drive, power, internal hard drive power, and portable hard drive slot power. Once everything is unplugged, unscrew the 4 screws holding the power supply in place on the back of the computer. Next, push the power supply from the outside and then lift it out. Step 6. CD/DVD drives. First, unplug the ribbon from the back of the drive. Once that is completed, pull on the tab securing the drive in place, then push it out from the inside. Step 7. Remove the hard drive. First, unplug the connector at the back of the slot and unplug the other end from the motherboard. Also, unplug the SATA cable from the motherboard and the hard drive. The portable hard drive slot is secured the same way the CD/DVD drive is, with a tab. Pull on the tab, then slide the slot out. To remove the hard drive from the side of the slot, unscrew the 4 screws securing it in place. You must be very careful not to drop the hard drive since it is very delicate. Step 8. Detach the memory or detach the RAM. To remove the RAM, push down on the both tabs holding the RAM in place, which are located at both ends of the RAM. Step 9. Remove the motherboard. The motherboard has 7 screws holding it to the frame, which are indicated by large white circles around them. Remove them and then lift the motherboard out of the frame. Step-by-step computer assembly or PC assembly procedures. Step 1. Prepare your workplace. Take inventory. Make space, make time. Prepare grounding protection. Have the drivers ready. Step 2. Prepare the motherboard. Great care should be taken when installing the motherboard. First, take the board out of its packaging and put it on top of the anti-static bag it came. Remember, you always want to safeguard your components from potentially hazardous static electricity. Wear your strap. Before you secure the motherboard onto PC case or chassis, inspect it carefully for any visible defects. Next, review the motherboard manual to make sure you are familiar with the motherboard layout and understand which socket is which. Manuals are extremely helpful, usually easy to read and include illustrations. Below you can find instructions on how to install the processor, the heatsink, and the memory modules on the motherboard. You should not place the motherboard into the computer case until you are told to do so. Step 3. Install the CPU. Use the unlocking mechanism to open the CPU socket, which is usually a lever. Carefully line up the pins and place the chip in the socket. It will fit only when oriented the proper way. An arrow or a missing pin on one corner of the chip will show you how to line things up. Align triangle as CPU and socket key marks. Lower the lever to lock the CPU into place. Step 4. Install the CPU heatsink. Follow the manufacturer's directions to install the heatsink and the fan that will cool the processor. If you bought an OEM CPU and a separate heatsink, you may need to spread a thin layer of the thermal grease that came with the heatsink over the chip to ensure proper transfer to heat. Some heatsinks come with this grease already applied. Attach the clip that holds the heatsink in place, keeping in mind that it may require a fair amount of force. Again, follow the instructions that came with the heatsink. They will show you how to fit it correctly. If you are in doubt, you can visit the manufacturer's website for more information. Plug the CPU fan's power connector into the proper connector on the motherboard. Step 5. Install memory or RAM modules. In order to install the memory modules, insert them into proper sockets and push down firmly but evenly until the clips on both sides of the socket pop into place. If your motherboard supports dual-channel memory, consult the user manual to determine which pairs of RAM sockets you should choose. The motherboard and the CPU are the brain and nerve center of your PC, so selecting these components is the most important decision you make. Step 6. Place the motherboard into the case. Some PC cases have a removable motherboard tray. If yours does, remove the screws holding it in place and pull it out of the case. Note the pattern of the holes in your motherboard and screw brass standoffs into the motherboard tray or into the PC case in the correct location. Check the layout of the sockets on the motherboard and confirm that the parts of your motherboard's back panel match the holes on the case's input-output shield that is installed in your case. If necessary, remove the old I/O shield by tapping it firmly a few times with the butt end of a screwdriver and then replace it with the shield that came with the new motherboard. Carefully position the motherboard on top of the brass standoffs. Line up all the holes and use the screws that accompany the case to fasten down the motherboard. If you're using a removable tray in your system, slide the tray and motherboard back into the case and then secure the tray. Step 7. Connect power supply. Making the proper connections is crucial to successfully assembling your PC system. Fortunately, manufacturers provide color-coded power cables and unique connector shapes to make the job easy. First, plug the large ATX power connector from your power supply into the matching port on your motherboard. Locate the smaller, square processor power connector and attach it to the motherboard. Note, your connector is usually located near the processor. As always, refer to your motherboard's manual for the exact location. Use your motherboard user manual and find the description about front panel connectors. Attach each of the tiny lids from the power and reset switches the hard disk activity lights, the PC speaker, and any front panel USB and FireWire ports to the corresponding pin on your motherboard. The needle nose pliers are useful for manipulating small pieces. Step 8. Install graphic or video cards. Begin by removing the back plane cover from the AGP or PCI Express 16 slot. Install the graphic cards on the slot and then secure the card with a screw. Step 9. Install internal drives. Make any necessary changes to jumpers and drives before mounting them in the case. A 2-drive system, 1 or 2 SATA, serial ATA is a standard hardware interface for connecting hard drives and CD/DVD drives to a computer hard drives, plus 1 parallel ATA, advanced technology attachment, optical drive, for example, is easy to set up. The SATA drives are jumperless and the optical drive can be set as master on its own parallel ATA channel. Many cases have removable drive rails or cages to house drives. Use the included screw to attach your drives to the rails or cage and slide them into the case. For external accessible drives, such as DVD recorder, you can save time by installing one drive rail and sliding the drive in for a test fitting to make sure that its front is flush with the case. When the drives are installed, connect power and data cables to each one. Parallel ATA drives use wide data cables that can be installed only in the correct way. Floppy drives use a similar but smaller cable. SATA drives use a thin 1 cm wide data cable. SATA drives use a new type of power connector that many power supplies don't come with. Fortunately, many motherboards ship with adapters for converting the standard 4-pin power connector to a SATA power connector. Step 10. Install the add-in cards. For each add-in card, you must choose a free PCI slot. Remove its back plane cover to allow access from the layer of the case. Carefully position the card above the slot and press down firmly to set the card. Secure the card with a screw. Many motherboards have additional sound connectors or ports housed on small add-in boards. Some of these plugs into slots in the motherboard. Others screws into the back of the case in place of slot covers. Usually, the additional ports are not essential to your PC's operation. For example, if you install a sound card, you do not need connectors to the motherboard's built-in sound chip. Check your motherboard manual to determine what each of these boards does. Connecting peripherals of a computer. When attaching hardware and peripherals of the computer, ensure that they are connected to the correct locations or ports. For example, some mouse and keyboard cables use the same type of PS2 connector, so you must know first the different ports that can be found in the back panel of the computer. Keep in mind, when attaching cables, never force a connection. Plug in the power cable after you have connected all other cables. Steps in connecting external hardware of a PC. Step 1. Attach the monitor cable to the video port. Step 2. Secure the cable by tightening the screws on the connector. Step 3. Plug the keyboard cable into the PS2 keyboard port. Step 4. Plug the mouse cable into the PS2 mouse port. Step 5. Plug the USB cable into a USB port. Step 6. Plug the network cable into the network port. Step 7. Plug the power cable into the power supply.